Armored Core 6 got its first balance patch in the form of some kinetic rifle adjustments. This is mostly adjusting the attack power, the rate of fire, and reload times, stuff like that. These buffs are definitely appreciated as it opens up some additional windows and build avenues. However, the 1.2 patch notes had a note specifying that PvP changes would be included at a future update. Since they specifically mentioned that PvP changes would be included in a separate patch, it makes me wonder if they're going to do more sweeping mechanical changes. So in this video, I want to talk about the 5 biggest changes I would like to see made to Armored Core 6's PvP. The first change I would like to see made is the inclusion of a mechanic from older Armored Core games, and that's flares. Flares are a countermeasure to missiles, which breaks the lock missiles have on you. Seeing as how powerful missiles are in Armored Core 6, I would love to see some method of playing around them a little bit more. My first thought as far as implementation goes is to include flares as a core extension with an ammo count of like 5 flare uses and a 10-second cooldown in between uses. Those numbers are arbitrary just to illustrate the mechanic, and the thought behind this is that you aren't using so many flares that it completely negates missile boat builds, but it actually includes decision making for the player with the flares themselves. Am I going to be making an aggressive approach? I can flare aggressively to apply pressure. Or maybe I'm about to be staggered by missiles, I can flare defensively. Because these have such a limited use and a cooldown, these should be used at strategic moments similar to other core extensions, and it would have finite resources. In addition, you would also lose access to your other core extension tools as well, so there's definitely a trade-off to taking flares in this case. Another option to include flares instead of a core extension is to maybe have them be a back left weapon similar to that of shields. The second item on this list is probably the biggest change I want to see happen personally, and that's the reduction in the effectiveness of infinite flight. I think the main culprit to nerf is the coral generator, but I'm not sure how you would nerf this without completely neutering the generator itself. My first thought is to have some sort of nerf on the post-recovery energy supply when you're recovering your energy while in the air, but I'm not really sure how that would play out in practice. I think another way to possibly nerf the infinite flight is to remove this like weapon recoil like state, keeping you in the air long enough for your energy to recover like that. Maybe while you're recovering energy, your weapons no longer keep you in the air like this. The reason I would like to see infinite flight nerfed though is because it kind of forces a player into 2 build options. One, the player can run the coral generator themselves and try to match the infinite flight of the enemy, and the other option has to do a little bit with the loadout that these infinite flight builds tend to run. These infinite flight builds often run nothing but missiles. This is because they're flying so high in the air, they outrange a lot of other weapons, and missiles don't have an effective range to deal their damage. You simply have to be in range to lock on. This allows the infinite flight build to lock on, dump their load, and fly away again without really bothering to look if the missiles even landed. This forces players who don't want to run the coral generator to run a missile build to apply pressure to the infinite flight build. And I think we've all probably encountered a double missile boat fight, and honestly, it's so boring to both watch and play. I do believe that there should be a high flight uptime build, and I think the coral generator can be the one to support that playstyle, but I don't think that infinite flight should be a thing. The skill behind infinite flight missile boats is simply non-existent. There's nothing interesting about firing missiles on cooldown and floating away. By forcing infinite flight builds to land, it will increase the skill level of those builds because they'll have to choose when they feel like they can come down and recover their energy supplies and get back into the air. This will give other builds, such as close range builds, a chance to capitalize on the grounded flight-based build. Basically, this gives a little bit more of a clear weakness of these infinite flight builds, and I think it would be healthy for the game. I've made this comparison before, but if you're a fan of fighting games, this would be like the equivalent of Street Fighter 6's Zangief trying to get in on a JP. You just have to kind of slowly work your way in, dodging attacks, and then capitalize when you actually get in close. The third item on this list is minor, and that's the introduction of a little bit more long-range support. Currently, there are like 3 sniper-like weapons in the game. You have the 60 SNA, which is the Iceworm Needle Launcher. You also have the Harris Linear Rifle. And then finally, there's the Curtis Linear Rifle. We know how powerful these stun needle launchers are when you're hitting a staggered enemy. And honestly, I think the needle launchers might need a little bit of a tweak in some different aspects, but I'll get into that a little bit later. But the changes I would make here to support a little bit more of a long-range rifle build are changes to how the Harris and Curtis work. I would like them to function a little bit better at longer ranges because right now they just feel too easy to dodge at those long ranges. There are two changes that I think could help a little bit with this sniper type of build playstyle. The first of those changes is to increase the bullet velocity when it's fully charged. As you can see here, with this fully charged shot at about 300 meters, it still has a bit of a travel time, and I just think that increasing that speed would make it a little bit more easy to land at long ranges. Now that might have some negative impacts in the mid-range if it's going to make the bullet projectile speed way too fast and hard to dodge. So another suggestion that I would have, and this is probably maybe a little bit more thematic to a sniper build, and that's to remove the indicator whenever a linear rifle shot is coming for the Curtis or the Harris, specifically when you're at certain range thresholds. So this could mean like that you keep the current effective range and bullet velocity the same, but whenever I'm charging up a shot at, say, I don't know, 200 meters plus, it's not going to show a range indicator or a charged incoming attack to the enemy. So basically they're not going to be alerted that they need to dodge an attack. A sniper is meant to be a little stealthy, but when you know that their attacks are coming from whatever effective range that they're being fired at, it doesn't really feel that fearsome, right? I think including some better long-range support opens up additional build variety because right now the only real long-range weapon options we have feel like they're just missiles. The fourth change I would like to see made is a little bit of an adjustment to assault boosting. You deal increased stagger damage when you're firing weapons while assault boosting, excluding a few instances like missiles and anything that puts you in a ready fire stance. You also receive less stagger buildup while you're assault boosting. It also enables the very powerful assault boost kick, which I'm including as a part of this assault boost adjustment. The downsides of assault boosting are simply that it has a little bit of a startup. You kind of have this little wind-up animation before you actually start boosting away, but even in that startup animation, you're getting the full benefits of the assault boost. You're taking less stagger damage. You're also, well, I mean, I guess you would be able to deal increased stagger, except you're just in this animation lock. So ultimately, there's not really a downside to assault boosting. The tweaks I would like to see made are simply minor adjustments for now, and hopefully not a drastic overhaul. For example, I'm using double Zimmerman right now, and if I fire both Zimmerman shots into this dummy, it's going to do about 90% of his stagger bar. Now if I'm assault boosting and I use both Zimmermans up close, it's going to fully stagger and I get like this full follow-up and just instantly kill things. It's just way too much burst damage off of a single assault boost mechanic, and I know this is also tied to a little bit of the Zimmermans, which I will also touch on later, but ultimately I think that reducing the stagger just slightly on assault boosting is probably a welcome change initially. Another adjustment I would appreciate is a little bit of a tweak to assault boost kick spamming. Right now, kicking doesn't really have that much of a downside. It does a ton of stagger damage, and it puts them in this little bit of like a locked state where you can almost get a guaranteed close range follow-up. So the only downside of assault boost kicking right now is that it puts you in this little bit of a recovery state, and that's assuming that you whiff that actual assault boost kick. I would like to see assault boost kicking put more into a high risk, high reward type of maneuver. And to achieve this, I would like to maybe try to tweak the recovery time, and to compensate for that, maybe have it deal an increased stagger amount. So like right now it's doing almost like 40% of a stagger bar. So what I would like to see is when you actually assault boost kick, it's going to do a little bit of an increased stagger amount, but you will stun the enemy a little bit longer. And to compensate for that, you're actually in this recovery state for your assault boost kick a little bit longer. So that increased stun time helps compensate for the longer recovery time of the assault boost kick, but this makes it so that if you whiff your assault boost kick, it's easier to punish, and like there's actually a real downside to assault boost kick spamming. Melee is also very weird in PvP. It's very awkward to tell how you're being tracked when you're actually doing like melee attacks, which I realize is a little bit of a problem with the netcode. But again, I still think that just encouraging an assault boost spamming type of playstyle is, I don't know if that's exactly what I would want to see inside of my Armored Core 6 PvP. And the fifth item is unlikely to happen in this first PvP patch, but I still think it would be really cool to see some form of matchmaking. The classic lobbies are, of course, nostalgic, but it doesn't really do well to promote a healthy PvP scene. There are often large gaps in skill with the lobby system, which can be a massive turnoff to new players trying to get into Armored Core 6 PvP. I think a matchmaking system would help with that a little bit, but it's not without its problems. With the way Armored Core 6 works, builds feel like they are very rock, paper, scissors, especially when it comes to duels. In some cases, it feels like certain builds just straight up can't function against other builds. If matchmaking were created, and this is way more specific to ranked play, I think, then I think matches would need to be a best of 3 in order to allow players to counterpick. And now in this last section, I want to rapid fire a few small honorable mention tweaks to be made in the next PvP patch. The first adjustment is to primary suspect number 1, and that's the Zimmerman shotguns. Right now, as I kind of showed before, if I were to fire both shotguns point blank, it's going to deal about 99% of a stagger bar due to that accumulated stagger. The change I think I would like to see made to the Zimmerman is just a reduction in the accumulative impact damage dealt. This accumulative impact stagger is what's really giving the Zimmerman its initial stagger burst power jump, and I think just nerfing that a little bit should bring it a little bit more in line. I'm more in favor of just making some small adjustments here and there instead of just gutting a weapon and just removing it as an option altogether, because that's not really what Armored Core is about. The second change I would like to see made are a little bit of an adjustment to handguns specifically. Handguns, as you might imagine, have very low attack power. However, they deal pretty decent stagger damage, especially the Viento. The fire rate of the Viento really makes up for its little bit lower impact compared to something like the Ducat. But the changes I would like to see for handguns, because ultimately handguns are filling the niche of a lightweight stagger buildup option that's meant to be used with a high payoff back weapon. I would like to see the reload times for these handguns reduced a little bit. The lowest reload time is the Viento at 1.9, but it still feels like it's a little bit too long of a reload, especially for how little of a magazine round and the high fire rate. The third change I would like to see made is to make lightweight builds have a reduced stagger recovery state, making them get punished less for being staggered. Right now it feels like running a lightweight build has so many more risks than rewards that it almost discourages you from running a lightweight build altogether. So I think by reducing the stagger time for these types of builds, it should help make up for the instances where they do get staggered. So the hope is to encourage more lightweight builds by just putting them a little bit more on a level playing field with heavyweight builds. And the final change that I would like to make, as I mentioned before, is to the needle launcher, the 60 SNA. The change I would like to see made is just to reduce the direct hit adjustment for this type of weapon. These weapons are extremely deadly in both PvE and PvP, and I think just reducing the direct hit adjustment, because they're oftentimes coupled with Zimmerman or just other high stagger weapons. So by reducing that direct hit adjustment, it should fix both PvE and PvP a little bit more. When double needle launchers are used in combination with double Zimmerman, you're essentially getting into one-shot territory, which I don't think is healthy for the game. The hope is by reducing the direct hit adjustment, they still stay relevant as a mid-range weapon that, you can just fire off to apply pressure. But when it's used in combination with a high stagger weapon like the dual Zimmerman, it's not going to have as much impact as it did before. But that's all that I have that I would like to see for the Armored Core 6 PvP changes. Let me know what kind of changes you would like to see in order for Armored Core 6's PvP to thrive down in the comments below. Anyhow, this was GooberTroy saying thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.